Quinn, President of LAW.
And I'm Laura Baker, President of the Nashville Bar Association. When asked about her legacy, Justice Ginsburg said, "To make life a little better for people less fortunate than you. That's what I think a meaningful life is. One lives not just for oneself, but for one's community."
We want to thank you all for joining us to reflect on RBG's meaningful life. Our first presenter of the evening is Justice Connie Clark of the Tennessee Supreme Court. The second woman to serve as Chief Justice of the Tennessee Supreme Court, Justice Clark is a trailblazer in her own right. Justice Clark, welcome. Thank you for being with us to share your reflections on Justice Ginsburg.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Laura. I was sitting at my house, half watching television on Friday night, December 18th, when a trailer scrolled across the bottom of the screen saying that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg had died of cancer. I couldn't even begin to process that. I jumped onto the internet to try to find out more details, but before I got very far, the telephone rang. It was Jennifer Krause from WTVF Channel 5 here in Nashville. She said their station was rushing to put together a story for their 10 o'clock news. They were gathering lots of quotes, she said, and they do more extended reporting over the weekend, but for that night, they really wanted to do an on-camera interview about Justice Ginsburg's legacy. Now, I have no vanity about this. I know I was not the first person called, but I must have been the only one who answered my phone that night, because 35 minutes later, a reporter and a photojournalist arrived in Franklin and spent about 10 minutes asking me questions about Justice Ginsburg's life, legacy, and influence on me. As I answered those questions, I found myself getting emotional about someone that I never, ever met. Words literally started pouring out of my mouth as I attempted, without really any prior preparation, to cover all the things I thought needed to be said. Things like, she had a brilliant legal mind, a storied career as a litigator, a judge, and a justice, but she also lived sort of a fairy tale romance and was an incredible wife, mother, and booby grandmother to her granddaughter. She was a warrior who fiercely fought to protect the rights of women and of all Americans. She inspired me as a lawyer and also throughout my judicial career. She helped shatter the glass ceiling and irreversibly change the professional landscape for women. She had unparalleled courage, a fearless independence, and at the end of her life, incredible fortitude as she fought against great odds to carry out the responsibilities of what for her was a lifetime appointment. I did not, in fact, cover in those 10 minutes all that needed to be said about her, and anyway, it got boiled down to 15 seconds that actually played on the air. But it was a great gift to me on that Friday night to be able to spontaneously voice to others how much she meant to me and to so many other people. And it's another great gift today to join my colleagues here, both to mourn the loss of, but mostly to celebrate the life and legacy of the most famous Supreme Court justice ever, the notorious RBG. We begin our remembrances this afternoon with our own incredible, amazing, groundbreaking Middle Tennessee federal judges. From the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, I proudly introduce Senior Judge Martha Craig Sissy Daughtry and Judge Jane Branstetter Strange.
Thanks, Connie, and hello, everybody. Unlike Connie, I was lucky enough to have known Ruth Ginsburg personally, and her friendship meant a great deal to me. We first met when I was on the faculty at the Vanderbilt Law School. She was also teaching. As I recall, it was 1972-73, and she was brought in as a speaker for the students at a time when she was in her United States Supreme Court advocacy period, and she had made quite a name for herself. So she came in, she spoke for professors for probably 50 minutes. And then I got a chance to meet her and talk to her. At the time, she was teaching, I believe, at Columbia. She had just left Rutgers Law School and gotten a position at Columbia Law School, from which she graduated. And at that point, she had also been a volunteer for the ACLU Women's Rights Project. And I'll never forget the day in my office when the mail produced a thing called Volume 1, Number 1 of the Women's Rights Law Reporter that Ruth founded. It was it convinced me we really were getting somewhere. She started the Supreme Court. She actually argued 6 cases in front of the Supreme Court in those years and won 5 of them. And she started in 1971 with a case that's going to sound familiar to everybody, the Frontiero case. They, as most of us know, had come up with this theory that she would represent men who were discriminated against in the law, and that the men on the courts, and the courts were full of men in those days and not much of anybody else, trying to get them to look at it from a slightly different angle. I'm proud of the fact that the last of the cases that she argued and won was Duran versus Missouri, because I had done a law review piece that was meant to get me tenure at Vanderbilt on women and juries. And that was the case, the breakthrough case that said women could not be either prohibited from sitting on a jury or discouraged in any way from sitting on a jury. It was the next year, 1980, that she went to the Court of Appeals, the DC Court of Appeals. And I remember talking to somebody I knew in the Carter administration. And it was one of those little conversations, like, I hear there's an opening on the DC circuit. At the time, I was in the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals, and but had gotten known to many of these folks because I was teaching every summer at NYU at the Appellate Judges Conference. And I said, I wonder if I would be at all competitive for that position. And this person said, oh no, that's Ruth's seat. And indeed it was. And so there wasn't any chance I had a prayer at that. Ruth in those days was about the same size she was all her life, which is to say very actually frail and small. And she wore hair pulled back in a low ponytail and always had a really beautiful scarf on the back of her head. And of course, later she changed to a bun. The next time I had any real conversations with her, I was giving a lecture at an annual lecture at NYU, and it was 1999, as I recall, and it was titled something like, "At the Beginning of the New Century, Where Are We with Women's Rights?" And of course, most of what was in there had to do with what Ruth Ginsburg had managed to do. And so I sent a piece to her to see whether she would, whether anything I had in there was wrong, and for any suggestions she might have. And she was very kind to look at it and send it back. We saw each other for many years, both at the ABA meetings in the summer and the NAWJ meetings in the fall. I do remember one, the NAWJ met in Washington, and there was a reception for us at the Supreme Court building, and both Ruth and Sandra O'Connor were there, and they had on black t-shirts, and on the front, Ruth said, I'm not Sandra and on the back it said, I'm Ruth. And Sandra said, I'm not Ruth, I'm Sandra on the back. It was a delightful reception and fun to see them as friends and being lighthearted with each other. I guess that's all I have to add. I will say this. I had well, not lots, but several interesting conversations with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but we never talked about Justice Scalia. And I will say finally that I will miss her a great deal, both personally and certainly professionally. What a really terrible loss. I guess what shocked me is that I was so convinced she would make it past the election. And I'm sure she tried her hardest. She was a committed, brave, smart, wonderful person. That's it, Laura.
So I'll pick up and say, I believe your name was mentioned in a couple of her opinions, Judge Daughtry, very favorably. Yeah. And you should be proud of that as well. The truth is, it was just remarkable good fortune to have Justice Ginsburg become the notorious RGB. And that's because her title in the legal world was well known, but not in the popular world. And I think there was real value in her ideas being important to our sisters and our daughters and our spouses and our brothers and our sons. And the study of her opinions now today for us, particularly as women, show how close we are in time to the time in which gender discrimination was an accepted part of life. It's a problem that Judge Daughtry and I are intimately acquainted with. And I'm glad to see that we are looking back and seeing once again what Ruth Bader Ginsburg showed and taught about how improper that type of discrimination is. I think it's a timely reminder because I'm a little bit afraid that the young women of this generation think that that's a dead issue. And I can assure you, all you need to do is look at the statistics that are out there now on employment, on advancement in employment, on placement in the judiciary, and on pay to see that that is not a dead issue. It is still a grave danger to which she spoke, and you need to be aware. But today is a celebration of RBG, and I celebrate her for her clear and clean and lean writing. She's been quoted as saying that the role of a judge is to persuade, not pontificate. If we're all together, I'm sure there are a lot of people who would be laughing about judges pontificating because we do that. But we've also moved into a world of aggressive writing that's often characterized by personal attacks or snideness, and that's a shame. And it's also very hard to respond to without engaging in any responsive snideness. So I would say that we have an example out there, RBG, because she did that very well. As law reviews have noted, she wrote to satisfy her two objectives, to champion equality and to champion collegiality. Take Lilly Ledbetter versus Goodyear, where the majority found a claim of gender pay disparity time-barred. And she wrote and said, this is a cramped interpretation of Title VII, and it's incompatible with wage discrimination and the statute's broad remedial purpose. And then she commented, the legislature may act to correct this court's parsimonious reading of Title VII, a nudge, in fact, that was accepted. And as a result, we had the Lilly Ledbetter Pay Act passed by the legislature. For me, the key to Ruth Ginsburg is her opposition leading by example. She took not the popular writing style that we see today, which in some instances tries to place the judge center stage, she did not write to call attention to herself. She wrote to show the reality that existed behind a case, to call out the errors of analysis made by her fellow judges in her own gracious way, and to push the law forward by clearly and succinctly explaining the Supreme Court's governing precedent and the principles that underlie that precedent, and that is equal justice for all. We are all better off for having had her, and I hope that we will follow her example. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justice Clark, Judge Daughtry, and Judge Stranch, for your thoughtful and special reflections. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our next group of presenters, three women who have blazed the trail for women running for elected office: Chancellor Ann Martin, Judge Angie Dalton, and Judge Anna Escobar, who will now reflect on RBG's influence in their career paths. Chancellor Martin, we will start with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah Ann, for allowing me to present. It's funny, when Margaret Bem called and asked Anna and Angie and me to present together, her observation had been that because the three of us ran for office together, we had developed a rapport among us, and we have some funny stories. And our favorite, when we were preparing for this, was going to an auto auction on Dickerson Road and trying to find each other, and we're tromping around in our high heels and our lady lawyer suits, trying to figure out where to go to meet the people who were at the auto auction. So we had a lot of fun doing that, and I feel like we've been through battle together. My experience, I actually met both Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sandra Day O'Connor in 1997, excuse me, when I was sworn into the Supreme Court. I was on the board of the National Conference of Women's Bar Associations, and we went to DC. We met in DC and we got sworn in. One of the women on the board was from Arizona. She had been the president of Women's Bar in Arizona. She'd been the president of the Women's Bar in Arizona, and got Sandra Day O'Connor to meet with us. And similar to what Sissy was saying, there was such a great rapport between Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg at that time, because they were the only women. And so Sandra Day O'Connor had asked if Justice Ginsburg would meet with us as well. And at that time, she'd only been on the bench for 4 years. Justice O'Connor had been there since 1981, and O'Connor was appointed by Reagan, and of course Ginsburg was appointed by Clinton. So I really do think Judge Daughtry's observation about these two women having a real rapport, because they were the first women, even though they came from different parties, really, was something that we observed in their warmth in meeting our group. And then the pictures you can see on the screen are the picture of our group, with one with O'Connor and one, excuse me, sorry, I'm having video trouble. I'm out of town at a conference, and one with Ginsburg. So anyway, that was a really, really exciting experience that I was proud to have met both of those justices. So now I'm going to turn it over to Angie Dalton to go next, and then Anna Escobar is going to go after Angie.
Thank you so much, and I'm so excited about this opportunity to talk about a jurist who has just been so influential on all of our lives. To say that she was a phenomenal jurist, I think, is probably an understatement. And I want to talk probably a little bit about, while we all have a great appreciation about how fine of a jurist she was, about how influential she was to all of our lives, and what great accomplishments that she's had. I want to talk a little bit about her influence on popular culture. As the mother of a teenage boy, I can definitely say, based upon my own personal experience, that she has had an influence on popular culture. I had the opportunity a few years ago to be on a panel to talk about Justice Ginsburg after watching the documentary that was presented. And I think Judge Stranch talked a little bit about the name that she actually received with grace the notorious RBG, which I just find phenomenal. Last year, I had the opportunity as a part of the Tennessee Bar Association's Law Academy to be sworn in at the United States Supreme Court. And, you know, to be in the presence of all of the justices of the court was, you know, was such a wonderful experience for me. And to be in that courtroom, to be in that space, you know, I could actually feel, and I think I'm feeling them now, the chill bumps on my arms as all 9 justices walked into the courtroom and graced the bench. I actually, because it was such an important experience, not just for me, I thought that my son would definitely have an opportunity to gain and learn something from that. So I took my husband and my son with me. Now, my son has no desire to seek a career in the law, and I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that. But interestingly, he actually took a liking to Justice Ginsburg after that experience. He was really just in awe of her and her presence on the bench. I mean, she's a very soft-spoken woman, but even with her small stature and as soft-spoken as she is, she definitely commands a lot of respect. And I think that my son, who at the time was 16 years old, was able to observe that and to see that and to have such an appreciation for that. In every moment that he had an opportunity to say something about Justice Ginsburg, he would, even after that experience last year. I will say this, that on that Friday evening that she passed away, he's now 17, my 17-year-old son was really touched by that. And so he and I talked a little bit about her influence, you know, on me as a lawyer and now as a judge, her influence, I think, on women across the country and around the world. You know, we talked about, you know, just so many of the images that we were able to see, you know, as we paid homage to her memory over the course of the weekend after she passed away. And, you know, he talked about how he thought it was just amazing to see so many people from so many different walks of life to pay their respects for her. And I will say that, you know, as the mother of a 17-year-old boy who has no interest in a legal career, it means a lot to me that Justice Ginsburg left such an impression on my son. So, you know, for that, I'm, you know, for many other things that she's accomplished and done in life with what she's done for the law and for women, I'm very appreciative, but I'm especially appreciative of the very positive impact that she's had on the life of my son. And so with that, I'm going to now turn it over to my dear friend and colleague, Judge Anna Escobar.
Thank you, Judge Dalton. You know, when we were campaigning, we would tell people, vote for AAA, and Angie and Anna. So we did spend a lot of time together. So I did not have the honor of meeting or seeing Justice Ginsburg like the other judges, but I think every working woman can say that she has influenced all of us. She's touched our lives. And Justice Ginsburg has so many great quotes, and I just wanted to talk about a particular quote that has really impacted me. She once said, "We should not be held back from pursuing our full talents, from contributing what we could contribute to society, because we fit into a certain mold, because we belong to a group that historically has been the object of discrimination." And I wanted to put things into historical context of her life and the legal history of her time. When she attended Harvard Law School, she was only one of 9 women in the class. And if she wanted to go to the bathroom at the law school, she had to run across the campus to another facility in order to use the restroom. She eventually transferred to Columbia Law School, where she graduated in 1959. And while she was in class there, she started a sentence with "I feel." And the professor quickly told her, "Women feel, men think." So then she graduated from Columbia, and she tied in first place in her class, yet she could not find a job at a firm because she was a woman. And at that time in the country, There were no women on the federal bench in the entire country. 2 years after she graduated, the Supreme Court finally approved women serving on jury duty. And in 1963, President John F. Kennedy signed into law the Equal Pay Act, which banned discrimination on the basis of sex. And then finally, in 1965, Griswold versus Connecticut, in that opinion, the Supreme Court struck down the one remaining state law that prohibited contraception between a married couple. So these were the times that she was operating under. And when you think about her quote and her life as a law student and a new lawyer, you must marvel how Justice Ginsburg forged ahead despite all the barriers she faced in her day-to-day life and in the world around her. She did not give up. She did not become helpless. And she didn't let others put her in a mold of what a woman should be. So when I ran in 2018 for General Sessions, I ran for the slot that Judge Dalton had, which is a domestic violence slot. And I thought I had the qualifications to do the job because I had learned a lot about domestic violence as a defense attorney, as a district attorney, and my time on the board of the YWCA. But my opponent, when he campaigned against me, didn't come after me for whether or not I had experience to do the job or the skill set. What he came after me with was that I wasn't Hispanic enough. And that absolutely infuriated me. I mean, what does that mean? That Hispanics can't be educated and have a career and speak English without an accent. The opponent also criticized me because I worked at too many places. But my opponent didn't realize that for women, oftentimes to get a pay raise, you have to switch from job to job. But as hurtful and as puzzling as that tactic was, I decided to keep my campaign clear on message. I had the experience, I had the skill sets, and I was fortunate to bring to the table that I was a Hispanic woman. So Justice Ginsburg's style leadership was inspirational to me, and I used that quote when I was really thinking about things during that time. Her leadership was not rude or hostile, and she paved the way for so many women, especially women lawyers. She wasn't tied down to conventional ways of thinking, but seemed to have a vision of what could be or how things should be. She knew what was right, and she kept just going ahead with her vision and wasn't stopped by roadblocks. This is such a great lesson to all of us. We should not let others define us, and we should not believe in the definition or the mold that others have put us in. We should create our own opportunities through hard work and relationships, and we should have a vision of what should be and what could be and operate under that vision. But most importantly, we should champion each other. And I thank you, RBG.
Thank you, Judge Escobar, Judge Dalton, and Chancellor Martin for your thoughts and reflections. We are now going to hear from our Davidson County Juvenile Court Judge, Sheila Calloway. Judge Calloway, as you all know, has dedicated her career to serving children and families in Nashville and ensuring an even playing field for all children. Judge Calloway, welcome.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you all for having me, and I love this program. I also want to start with a quote from Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg as well. One of the things that she said was, real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. And I know when you think about Justice Ginsburg, most of us think about all of her advocacy that she did for women and changing the scenery and employment in the judiciary and everything in our nation for women. But I also, as the juvenile court judge, want to make sure that we don't forget about her strong advocacy for our youth as well. She was a pivotal voice in advancing the constitutional rights of our children. During the arguments of the cases Sullivan versus Florida, Miller versus Alabama, and Jackson versus Hobbs, it was Justice Ginsburg who embraced the notion that our 13 and 14-year-old children who had been condemned to die in prison were children as she plainly stated from the bench during the oral arguments. The results of that decision, the Miller versus Alabama decision, have now shielded thousands of children, 17 and younger, from mandatory sentences of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. And in the case of Roper versus Simmons, the court ruled that putting children to death is unconstitutional. And in the oral arguments, it was Ginsburg who pointed out that teenagers can't vote. They can't sit on juries. They can't serve in the military and are typically wards of their parents. And she said, why should it be that someone is death eligible under the age of 18, but not eligible to be an adult member of the community? She famously said of the idea of sending a child to prison for life without a chance of parole was essentially, you're making a 14-year-old a throwaway person. It was those decisions and those statements that she made through those decisions that inspire me each and every day to continue to fight for our children. And I am happy to do that. And I'll close on one more quote that she said: fight for things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. So I'm joining Justice Ginsburg in her fight for our youth. And I hope that you will join with me as we continue to fight for the rights of our youth. Thank you. And now I will have the pleasure of introducing one of our youth that will join us today. Our next presenters are the LAW past president, Abby Sparks, and her beautiful daughter, Zoe, who is 9 years old and in the 4th grade at Harpeth Valley Elementary School. Abby and Zoe will lead us in the Mourner's Kaddish, also known as the Mourner's Prayer, a Jewish prayer said in honor of the deceased. Thank you, Abby and Zoe.
Thank you, Judge Calloway. I wanted to say a few remarks before we recite the prayer together. When I got the news that Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, my family was preparing for Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and the beginning of the High Holy Days, which began at sundown that Friday evening. A tweet was shared that night that went viral, and I'm sure many of you saw it, that said, according to Jewish tradition, a person who dies on Rosh Hashanah, which began tonight, is a tzaddik, a person of great righteousness. And although I was devastated by the news, I found this detail to be meaningful. Justice Ginsburg had a piece of artwork in her chambers that read, Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof, which means justice, justice shall you pursue. Righteousness and justice, which share the same root letters in Hebrew, were at the core of who she was in life and now in death as well. Justice Ginsburg's Jewish identity was also at the core of who she was. She said on multiple occasions, my heritage as a Jew and my occupation as a judge fit together symmetrically. The demand for justice runs through the entirety of Jewish history and Jewish tradition. I take pride in and draw strength from my heritage. So to recognize and honor this heritage, Zoe and I will be reciting the Mourner's Kaddish. But first, I'd like to offer a few words of explanation about the Mourner's Kaddish for those who are unfamiliar. If you're not familiar with this prayer and you were to read the English translation, you might be surprised to see that it's not, in fact, a prayer about mourning at all. It doesn't mention death or mourning or loss. Instead, the prayer is about praising God and affirming life. Another aspect of the prayer that's important to understand is the collective experience of reciting it with a group. According to Halakha, Jewish law, a minyan, or a quorum of at least 10 Jewish adults, is required to say Kaddish. This act of praying and mourning and remembering as a part of the community rather than as a solitary act is powerful. The collective voice lifts up the mourner and reassures them that they are not alone. This communal act keeps the mourner among the living, both literally and metaphorically. Saying Kaddish insists that the mourner turn away from death and toward life. As I mentioned, a minyan is made up of 10 Jewish adults, and traditionally only Jewish men were counted in the minyan. Justice Ginsburg actually spoke publicly about the pain of being excluded from reciting the mourner's Kaddish after her mother's death because she was a woman. Since that time, as Justice Ginsburg fought for equality through the legal system, the practice of Judaism has also evolved to become more egalitarian. And today, women recite mourner's Kaddish alongside men in many denominations of Judaism. So as we mourn and honor Justice Ginsburg, saying Kaddish together reminds us to turn towards life, to continue fighting for justice and equality. May her memory be for a blessing. And at this point, we are going to rise and recite the mourner's Kaddish. I believe the words are going to appear on the screen. So if you'd like to follow along with the transliterated English, you are welcome to do so. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah v'alma divra chirute v'amlich malchute v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael v'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'me'omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei dekudasha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata ta'amiran v'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imramav huya aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Thank you, Abby and Zoe. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kristen Blackburn. I'm the immediate past president of LAW. And we wanted to make time during this program to share the impact that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had on the lives of our members. As you've heard tonight, Justice Ginsburg was a legal trailblazer who spent much of her life fighting for gender equality and equal justice under the law. Personally, I am in awe of the many opportunities that are available to me because of Justice Ginsburg's legacy. Her work has led to women obtaining equal pay for equal work, has protected women from pregnancy discrimination, has allowed women to serve on juries, attend elite colleges, participate in sports, and even something as simple but as powerful as the ability to have a credit card in your own name are all attributed to Justice Ginsburg. The product of her life's work is that women have equal protection under the law. And for these benefits, many of which we now take for granted, I am eternally grateful. And in consideration of her life's work, it is remarkable that the same principles to which Justice Ginsburg devoted her life are now reflected in the founding purposes of LAW. So many of LAW's purposes, including promoting the constant improvement of the law, especially as it relates to women, advocating for increased numbers of women on the bench, leading local, state, and national bar associations, promoting career opportunities, including alternative work options, promoting diversity in the workplace, and fostering a public dialogue about social injustice. These are the same purposes by which Justice Ginsburg lived her life, and even in death, she continues to inspire the next generation of lawyers to continue to fight for the change that she knew was possible. Next, we're going to hear from LAW members, Blake Howell of Legility, Christy Arth, a professor at Belmont University College of Law, and Darkenya Waller, the executive director of the Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee, about the impact that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had on their lives.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. So it was 2007. I was visiting Indiana University Law School in Indianapolis. It was a good visit, but I was uninspired. And I had a 4-hour drive back to Lexington, where I went to college at Transylvania University. I walked out the door to the parking lot and noticed two massive bodyguards surrounding a very, very tiny woman. And I was like, what in the world? And I thought immediately, that is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I know who that is. And it's unmistakable when you see her, because as the people who have met her in real life know, she was a tiny, tiny person who we found out who was larger than life. So I drove back and I thought about that. And I think I called my mom. I called everybody I knew. Oh my gosh, I saw her. And she looked at me. I would like to think she looked at me and thought that I was good looking or something, but I assume it's probably just because I had an ill-fitting blazer and some really bad Banana Republic pleated khakis, that knowing her now, her sense of humor, she was probably just laughing at me. But regardless, a joke at my expense by RBG is definitely worth it and a great memory. So I thought about what I wanted to do in my career. As we all know, we're all sitting here, we've gone through the LSAT, we've gone through going through college and then applying for law schools, visiting law schools. It's a terrible process that just takes it out of you. And then I thought, what do I want to do? I can't be a tax lawyer. I'm not good at math. I'm not great at science, so I can't do this. But my background in college was in the civil rights movement, everything from Reconstruction all the way to the Voting Rights Act. And so I studied more and more on RBG's life. And wow, she devoted her life's work to equal rights. And I became very, very inspired. And from people who are friends with me and know me, I'm from a very not diverse area in Kentucky. And it was just fascinating to me, to learn about other people's backgrounds and their experiences. And I wanted to fight for that. So in law school, I ended up working for Maria Pabon Lopez. We wrote a book on the DREAM Act. And I worked with Professor Florence Roisman on civil rights. So I just continued that through law school. And now I'm a board member on LAW, and I am impressed every single day with everybody who's on this call right now, and all the great female attorneys I meet, and all the people who champion equal rights. So Judge Daughtry, Justice Clark, and Judge Strange. I assure you, if we haven't had a one-on-one communication, it's because you're rock stars to me and you make me nervous. And I hope that after this is all over, we can do that. Judge Calloway, I know that we will be singing karaoke again before we know it. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who inspires me every day, and everybody who fights the good fight.
Hi, I'm Christy Arth. I'm an assistant professor of law at Belmont University, and my RBG story is from law school. I went to law school at Ohio State, and it was my first year serving on the law review. So I was just an underling doing site check, and that year our symposium's key speaker was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So they did not let underlings like me get very near her. The next year, when I was on the executive board, we had Justice Scalia in, and so I was able to, be in small group panels with him, get his wine recommendations, etc. So I've always been a little bit curious of what it would have looked like if those 2 years had been flipped, and I'd been able to, have a more intimate conversation with Justice Ginsburg. Not bitter at all, as you can tell. But I did get to hear her speak that night at Ohio State. And like a lot of people have said, she was petite and unassuming, but just whip smart. And I also really appreciated how she had a sense of playfulness about her. And she did the obligatory OHIO that we apparently make everybody do at Ohio State. And that night, she was being interviewed by one of my favorite law professors, Professor Deborah Merritt, who had actually served as a law clerk to Justice O'Connor. So it was really neat to kind of see that lineage, her interviewing the only second ever Supreme Court justice. And they had a really great conversation. But the one sort of story I remember Justice Ginsburg sharing was about how when she was pregnant, she just like bought super baggy clothes so that she could hide it and her male colleagues just wouldn't know. And she just like kept powering through. I don't remember if this was when she was practicing or when she was a law professor, but nevertheless, when she was pregnant, she just, bought her baggy clothes and went about her business, being a total rock star. And I just thought, wow, what a legend. And I also thought, how cool would it be to be a law professor? I didn't let myself dream that far ahead because, so many stars have to align for that to be possible. But of course, it was Justice Ginsburg's work that made it possible for me to even have the job that I have today. And certainly to have it while also being the mother of two boys who are, as Justice Ginsburg's son has been described, as, quote, spirited. So that's my RBG story, and I'll kick it over to Darkenya.
Thank you for the introduction. So after the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I shared a reflection on social media that inspires the work that I do. This phrase, first spoken by Sarah Moore Grimke, a 19th century abolitionist and women's rights activist, was quoted by Ruth Bader Ginsburg stating, "I have no favor of my sex. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks." The imagery of the statement paints the picture I see on the face of the clients I represent as an advocate for victims of domestic violence. As an advocate for victims of domestic violence and survivors, it was my work and indeed my honor to represent so many women who bore the burden of the proverbial and literal foot to the neck. Justice Ginsburg's legacy put on full display the power of focused and determined advocacy toward a cause. Regardless of your political view on the subject of women's productive health, the gumption it took to sit in a U.S. Supreme Court confirmation hearing and argue in favor of a position that could very well deny her appointment was fearless. Nonetheless, her conviction to the cause of equal protection outweighed her own personal gain of ascending to the highest court in the land. She was a feminist in the truest sense of the word. In a no-nonsense way, she saw no issue with an all-female U.S. Supreme Court. Why not? I mean, if we're equal. No concern with fighting for the voting rights of Black and brown people. I mean, why not? If we are, in fact, equal. No concern with insisting on the paternal leave time for men. I mean, if we all are actually equal. As the executive director of the Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee and the Cumberland, we get to fight each day to ensure the equal protection of the law for so many whose access to justice is often not equal. Unafraid and unapologetic, Justice Ginsburg understood the impact of the proverbial knee. She also understood our role as advocates, lest we throw away our umbrellas in a rainstorm just because we are not getting wet. So as we celebrate the life of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we remember our charge to fight for the rights of those who are constantly under attack. Thank you to all of you all for this opportunity to celebrate the life of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Thank you, Darkenya. And thank you to all of our wonderful presenters for sharing with our audience today. Sarah Ann and I would like to end our program today by sharing a toast with everyone in honor of the meaningful life of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg is known for her dissents. She said, "Dissents speak to a future age. It's not simply to say, my colleagues are wrong and I would do it this way, but the greatest dissents do become court opinions, and gradually over time, their views become the dominant view. So that's the dissenters' hope, that they are writing not for today, but for tomorrow."
To fulfill RBG's hope for tomorrow, we must be RBG. Be a trailblazer.
Fight for the things you care about.
Have a sense of humor, like me and Sarah Ann.
Be in places where decisions are being made.
Be a little deaf every now and then.
Use your talent to do your work to the very best of your ability.
Enjoy what makes you happy.
Be a lady, even you gentlemen.
Whatever you choose to do, leave tracks. Don't just do it for yourself. You will want to leave the world a little better for your having lived.
So please raise your glasses, if you have one, and join Laura and me in toasting Justice Ginsburg for leaving the world a lot better for having lived.
Hear, hear. Thank you again for joining us tonight. And I also want to extend a special thank you to Margaret Bem, who approached Sarah Ann and LAW and myself and the MBA about holding this special program. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as we have. And as we close out the program, we will have a brief slideshow.